This is it. This is it. The podcast, My Road Trips Planner. And my name is Shane. Welcome. If you're looking for a podcast that talks about road trips, you found it right here, right now. All right. So just did some recording earlier today, around 9 a.m. Now I'm off. I was just at Panera for the past 2 hours working on some editing and just posting. So trying to get things done today, trying to move on. Got a bunch of stuff in the back from projects that are being done at the house to bring to the guys that are working on the house, but bring that later. So, in this podcast, I want to talk about, so for the past week now, I was able to do 5 short, when I say short, I know some people will say, Shane, you do a 15 to 20 minute podcast. Yeah, that's a regular size one for me at the moment. Things could change, you never know. But right now, I'm literally doing these short 1 minute videos. It's called 1 Minute with Shane. And just giving some travel tips, maybe some lists on what to bring, things like that. And so that's what I'm doing right now. And right now I'm just cruising along. Gonna go clean out the car, a couple little things to get done. But what I wanted to focus on in this podcast is that, life is really, and I've talked about this in other podcasts last year, but life is really about just getting out there. I think a lot of times we forget that life is written by those who do things. It's just the way it happens. And for me, in the last year I felt like a really positive year for me. As much as I would love to have done more, for me, putting out 100 podcasts that were 15 to 20 minutes each made me feel really good. It made me feel like, hey, I'm moving on. I'm making things. I'm doing things. Something that I've always wanted to do. I want to talk about trips and stuff like that. So I want to talk about, look, planning is fun. I enjoy planning. I love planning. Me and my buddy John, the Connecticut wedding singer, just had this past Sunday, we had a meeting about planning our road trip that's coming up. And so I really believe in planning. I believe that planning is great. I believe that having a good plan can help you get to the next level. But I think there comes a point in life where you have to stop planning and you have to start making actions. So for me, this year, 3 things I'm working on that I want to focus on, 3 words. And those 3 words are awareness, attitude, and action. And for me, the reason I'm going to work on those is because I feel like I have to get to a place to be aware of what's happening, make action, having a good attitude, and then create that action to get there. And so one thing I'm coming to a reality is that the older I get, I have to be more aware of my surroundings, the time I'm using, the things I put my effort in. I have to watch out for, because I have to remember that at the end of the day, I'm just looking to become a better person, but I'm also looking to grow this podcast. This is going to be up on my YouTube page. This is also going to be on my Apple Podcast, and this is also going to be on my Spotify podcast, and so on My Road Trips Planner. And so I want to really be able to focus on making myself aware of the things I'm putting my time and effort in. If I want to put these videos out there, I need to put the time and effort in. I need to give myself the energy, but also give myself the time, creating those moments. And I think that's the biggest thing. So as much as I can create those moments by planning, I have to put myself in a position to actually do it. And so that's one thing I'm working on right now, is actually taking the actions. I'm a guy who tries to have a good attitude about things. I don't always. Sometimes I can have a bad attitude. And I believe my wife will attend to that I can have a bad attitude sometimes. I think we all can have bad attitudes. And so I'm learning to be aware of my attitude. So when I go to take action, it's not with a bad attitude I'm taking action. It's with a good attitude. And so what does this have to do with road trips? I think to be aware that, are you planning too much or are you planning not enough? And so to be aware of those things. And so I would ask the question, what time am I allowing? What am I actually planning for? And to use the word what is very important. Not just why. I think it's good to have a why of why you do things, or the reason to do things. But I think the biggest part you want to get to is understanding, what can I do to get to that next level? And I think that's really important. I think the problem we do today is, and I'm this person, and that's why I'm saying this, because I know there's people out there that are listening and they understand this. Sometimes we overplan. We're going to say, hey, we're going to Disney World one day. We're going to get there. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And I get that Disney World is a lot of money. But you may be like, hey, I just want to go and just do a trip. I just want to get in the car and just drive somewhere. I want to go somewhere. I want to do something. Just to get out of my house, to get out of the city I live in, to just do something. And I think a lot of times we'll say something, we'll plan it, and then we'll put it on the shelf. And I think that happens a lot, even with me. I'll do a lot of planning, and I'll put something on the shelf, and I'm like, why did I put that on the shelf? I need that. I want to do that. But I put it on the shelf because I overplan. I plan and I plan, but I don't take the action. And so that's the important part, is saying to yourself, hey, you know what? I need to take an action. I need to do something more than what I am doing right now. And that's important. And I think finding the time to do that is important. I think it's really hard. You know, if you're a parent, I think that's when it gets really hard. And I know for me that's happened a lot. That, you know, sometimes I can tell that it's going to be a really rough day, or it's going to be a simple day. And it all depends sometimes on how my kids feel. And that's one thing that I've learned very quickly, trying to find a spot to park here. That's why I'm still talking, but I just want to find a place to park that I don't make people feel like, oh, you recording me. So that was a little divergent, but here we go back to the podcast. So I think one of the biggest things to learn is to give yourself the grace to just do it. I think that's where we have to come to the realization of everything, and making sure that we set ourselves up to create something well. Because you can plan and you can plan and you can plan, but until you do what you're planning, it's just an idea. That's it. It's just an idea. And that's what I've come to realize more than anything in my life, is coming to the realization that an idea is great. We can plan it. We can put it all together. But we have to come to the realization. And it's like, why are you talking about this on a podcast? Because I really think if we can take the time to sit back and say, okay, I need to create the time and the space to actually do this. So that's why people, when they create goals, they write their goals down, but then they have a date for that goal. So one thing that's worked for me very well, whenever I have a meeting with anybody or do anything with anybody, if we need another meeting, we set up that meeting before we leave. If we're going to do something, we prepare ourselves for the next step. So we say, hey, we're going to meet again. Great. Okay, what do we need to accomplish what do we need to accomplish before the next meeting? And so that's just the same way with traveling. One, you come up with an idea. You say, hey, you know what? I live in Connecticut. Let's just use this as an idea. I live in Connecticut, and I want to go up to Lake George, right? Lake George is over 3 hours away from me. So I need to plan how many days now. So I have the idea, I want to go to Lake George. So I sit down, me and my wife, we sit down, we say, okay, how are we going to plan to go to Lake George? Or if you're planning with a friend, that can happen too. So you're sitting down and you say, okay, I want to go to Lake George. It takes 3.5, 4 hours to get there. Okay, so we need travel time. We need to understand how much it's going to take. So we go through the plan. We lay everything out and we say, okay, but we don't put a date down. And we keep saying we want to go to Lake George. We keep planning, oh, well, we should do this there. We should do that there. Hold on. You haven't planned a date yet. Until you put a date down, you're going to keep planning and planning and planning. So to create and help you get to the action, find a date. So before you're done with your next meeting, you and your wife, or maybe you and a friend, and you're saying to yourselves, hey, you know what? We really want to do this trip. So how are we going to do this trip? Well, you sit down and you say, we're planning a date. And so you say 6 months from today, you find a date. I don't know. Let's just say it's July 25th. We're planning. We're going to have July 25th to July 28th. It gives you a couple days. You can go up to Lake George for a couple days. You start planning all the increment things that need to happen. And I think that's the biggest thing. And that's what happens in life. And so that's where I'm at too. So as I go along and I say these things, I'm at this point too. It's figuring out, hey, you have a date, you plan something, and you get to it. Because I think a lot of times we forget to plan that date. Just like in traveling, we forget to plan that date so that we can get to the next level. And I think a lot of times in life is we need to sit back, take a deep breath and say, okay, what's the next step? How do I create action? Because again, planning is really great. You can plan all you want, and I'm a planner. I want to plan. I want to schedule things. I want to make sure they're in the calendar. But that's what you need to do. You need to schedule it. You need to put it on the calendar and say, on this date, we are going to Lake George or wherever you want to go. And you create the opportunity and you create the time. And so let's go back to the beginning of this. I'm creating time to create this podcast. This podcast is going to be about 15 minutes. I have to set the time. So right now, I've created this time to do this. It's the same way with my 1 minute with Shane's. I'm setting the time to accomplish it. And so I hope this helps. I know sometimes it may seem like I'm just talking, but I feel like this is like a conversation. I'm giving you what I've been thinking about. I'm putting it out there. Again, I hope it helps you. We'll get it crisp. We'll get it more together as we go along. You'll get better and better at the conversation. But if I can put something out there for you, if you've been planning and you've been talking about a trip for a long time, if it's not on the calendar, okay, come here. I want to just say this real quick. Put it on the calendar. Open your calendar book. Open your phone where your calendar is. Put it in the calendar, because if you don't, it's going to keep going here. It's going to keep going, okay? It's going to be behind you. It's going to be 3-4 years. It's going to be 5-6 years. It's going to be 10, 11, 12 years. If you really want to do this, you've looked and you said, hey, we've budgeted for this. We've set up all these different things. We've planned for it over and over again. We keep talking about it. Make the action. Write it in right now. This is what I'm going to ask of you. This is your homework, okay? Schedule it. Just write it down. Find a weekend. Say, hey, this is a long weekend. 4 days. Let's take this. We're going to schedule what we wanted to do for a long time. Let's get it done. Because this is the thing. You keep putting it off. Like I keep saying, I know I'm repeating myself a lot of times through this. But if you don't schedule it, it won't get done. So listen, this is it. This is it. The podcast, My Road Trips Planner. Hey, thanks for listening. I appreciate it. My name is Shane, and the road's open. Let's drive.